Coming up in the Bahamas tonight, fire destroys the Butler estate and a neighboring family loses their home.
Also ahead, the country's crime boss outlining strategies to address the crime problem.
And bail for a groom. The Bahamas Tonight starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Everyday.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Keishla Adderley.
And I'm Andrew Knowles. Thanks so much for joining us.
Topping the news tonight, Prime Minister Perry Christie has put a 4-year timeline on a strategic plan to lower the country's deficit. At this hour, he continues the wrap-up of the mid-year budget debate.
He told Parliament earlier in his presentation that along with the thrust to promote investment and growth is the goal of confronting the country's dire fiscal position.
We have developed a fiscal consolidation plan that you cannot disagree with, which is intended to sharply reduce the government's deficit and put the burden of debt on a downward path to lower and more manageable levels. That's what we're doing. Thank you, Peter. Go ahead, please. Our plan is balanced, measured, and targeted to achieve steadily and gradually our deficit and debt objectives over a 4-year period. Mr. Speaker, the transition to these objectives is to be secured by the pursuit of a number of immediate operational fiscal targets in respect of recurrent expenditure, capital expenditure, and recurrent revenue. And specifically, as was spelled out in detail in the contribution of the Minister of State for Finance last week, and I just want to reiterate what the Minister of State for Finance said when he opened the debate. We are aiming to reduce the size of recurrent expenditure relative to the size of the economy by some 2 percentage points. And let me
Mr. Christie was speaking to also spoke to two accounting misallocations. He said the BTC sale was part of a false reading of the GFS deficit.
The reduction in the deficit in financial year 2010 to 2011 was achieved, Mr. Speaker, by incorrectly accounting for the proceeds of 51% of the sale of BTC as revenue and not as financing. You put it as revenue and not as financing. This misallocation disguised, Mr. Speaker, a worrisome deterioration in the public finances as demonstrated in a doubling of the fiscal deficit in financial year 2011 to 2012. So all of a sudden you saw this percentage going and then it, boom. All right, that was by taking those monies and putting them in there. So, Mr. Speaker, a doubling of the fiscal deficit in financial year 2011 to 2012, which could have been worse if not for the Ministry of Finance again wrongly accounting for the sale of notes which the government held in NAD as revenue and not as financing, which is the international standard. So they were heading to elections. And you want to make things look good. Never mind the fact that the following year, in reality, can set right back.
30 juveniles between the ages 16 and 17 years are on remand for murder, attempted murder, armed robbery, drugs, and rape. The startling statistics revealed today by the National Security Minister during his contribution to the mid-year budget. It's led him to contend that juveniles continue to present the greatest crime threat to the country, and he's challenging the wider community to better assist authorities. We get the story tonight from Anthony Newbold.
Dr. Nottage attributes the overall crime problem and its seriousness to a confluence of socio-economic challenges, gangs, guns, high unemployment, and poor parenting.
We live in a town where you could rent a gun, lease a gun, or buy a gun without a license. And I don't know who these people are who can shoot their friend and then go and stand over their friend and shoot him some more in the head to make sure he's dead. These are children? Whose children are these? And if they are our children, we could do something about it. That's what I mean. Boy, I wish we could get the pastors to work with us on giving these children, these boys, fathers.
Now, having noted some of the contributing factors, Dr. Nottage says the government has been working feverishly, yet systematically, to address the crime problem, the results of which he anticipates to be long-term, concrete solutions. Having passed crime legislation, expended $1.3 million on new patrol cars over the past 6 months, expanded court services and trained squads of new police recruits, Dr. Nottage says the next plan of action is implementing mentoring and socialization programs. One such program he referred to as violence breakers.
Violence breakers are essentially young men and young women who have themselves been involved in criminal activity in the past and who have shown by the lives they live today that they have changed their direction and they are seeking to live positive life, to get skills, to get regular jobs like everybody else, but they have influence within their communities. And so we are hoping to engage them to assist us in determining when things are about to happen so that we can prevent them from happening, but much more importantly, for them to get in the heads and the minds of parents and of young men and women who live in these communities and help to keep them committed to a positive way of life, Mr. Speaker.
According to Minister Nottage, 460 accused persons are currently wearing the ankle bracelets, a figure he asserts as far too high. He says the government intends to make a substantial and noticeable impact on crime and will spare no effort in removing the criminal element for good if it has to. Anthony Newbold, ZNS Network News.
A large crowd gathered outside the magistrate's court earlier this afternoon to catch a glimpse of the man accused of murdering 24-year-old Nayoshi Adderley and burying her body in a shallow grave off Cowpen Road. 33-year-old Jamal Sargent was escorted to court today as bystanders made jeers. Sargent, who is a resident of Hospital Lane, was charged with murder. It's alleged that between Saturday, February 22nd and Saturday, March 8th, he caused the death of Nayoshi Adderley. As is customary, Sargent was not required to enter a plea. When asked if he had anything to say, he said that he didn't. He was remanded to Her Majesty's prison until May 30th, and a voluntary bill of indictment is expected to be filed. He was not represented by counsel today. After calling just 3 witnesses, the prosecution has closed its case in the Andre Berbal unlawful sex trial. The 51-year-old Trinidadian and former 8 Mile Rock High School teacher is accused of having unlawful sex with 2 of his underage male students. Allegations he has denied. During the trial, the court heard testimony from one of the alleged victims, the victim's mother, and the police investigator. It's unclear this time whether Berbal will take the stand in his own defense when the trial resumes tomorrow. Darrell Taylor is prosecuting the case. Ramona Farquharson Seymour is defending Berbal. Justice Roy Jones is presiding. A police inspector from Freeport, Grand Bahama was among the witnesses testifying today in the human trafficking case in the Supreme Court. The inspector testified that he arrested the accused, 25-year-old Chavanese Sasha Gay Hall, back on January 28th of last year on human trafficking charges after speaking to one of the alleged victims at the Central Detective Unit. The accused is facing 4 counts of trafficking in persons. She's also accused of withholding the passports of 2 Jamaican women and and later bringing them to the Bahamas for the purpose of sexual exploitation. She has denied those allegations. Director of Public Prosecutions Vinette Graham-Allen and Yuko Bonamy are prosecuting the case. Jarim Mangura, Brian Dorset, and Benjamin McKinney make up the defense. Senior Justice John Isaacs is presiding. A 35-year-old man who got married at the Central Police Station on the weekend has been granted $15,000 bail by a Supreme Court judge. Kendrick Tinker appeared before Justice Indra Charles today and was granted bail with reporting conditions. He and two other men were arraigned days after his jailhouse wedding on days before, that is, drug charges. They returned to court on June 5th for trial. Now, following that jailhouse wedding, 4 police officers were suspended for their roles in the matter.
A Bahamian delegation could be heading into Haiti early next week for talks with officials of the Republic of Haiti. For years, this country has been feeling the pinch of the illegal migration problem in our social and educational sectors, and it's also impacted the overall economy. On the heels of those regional talks, Minister of Foreign Affairs Fred Mitchell says a subsequent session will be held in Haiti to discuss the Haitian challenge.
The Prime Minister was able to share in a very frank way the migration issues which we face with the Republic of Haiti. And as a result of that intervention, we are to meet at the foreign ministers level and with the ministers of national security next week in Haiti to discuss what the Haitian government can further do to assist us in dampening the rush of Haitian migrants into this country. It is having a destabilizing effect. It is adverse to our national security, and we have to take steps to bring it further under control.
Well, still ahead tonight, fire rips through the pond, destroying the homestead of a prominent family.
And the Tall Pines MP keeping a promise. You're watching The Bahamas Tonight.
This segment of the news is brought to you by Shell Quality Fuels.